my name is Kirsten and I like to read. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we are talking about the 21 books that I am desperate to read in 2021. I'm making this video because I think it'll be super interesting a year from now to go back, watch this video, and reflect on which books I actually prioritized in the year 2021. These books are in no particular order, and they're definitely not the only ones on my shelves that I am desperate to read, but they are the 21 at this moment that are sticking out to me the most as like, Kirsten, you gotta get on these books. So I guess with that, let's get right into the books. The first one that I am desperate to read in 2021 is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. I've never read Stephen King. I tried to read The Stand when I was in about 6th grade, but I think I was too young to really, give it a good shot. And he is one of the authors that I really want to read more of. But I would like to prioritize this one over his other ones because I do think that historical fiction is something that I've really been getting into lately and really been feeling and enjoying lately. And I think alternate histories are really interesting. And this is indeed, kind of an origin of an alternate history. This is about a man who is a high school English teacher, and one day he ponders the question, what would our today's society be like if JFK had never been assassinated? So he goes back in time to try to prevent the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So that's all I really know about this. I'm not even sure how accurate of a description that is because that's just what I'm getting from the synopsis on the back. But this sounds fascinating to me, and I am ready to give this a go in 2021. Also, can we just talk about, look at how big that is. This is a chunker of a book, but I am ready for it. The next book I want to read in 2021 is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a historical fantasy fiction, so based on historical events, but it has some fantastical elements involved. And as far as I know, this is about a girl named Rin who gets accepted into some sort of military academy. And that's all I really know about it. I love books that have like that sort of academy, magic school, military school type of feel to it. I don't know why, but they do something for me that just works. I also know that this is a really heavy read, which I'm also excited about because I love a good book that can make me cry. And, in one video earlier, I said it's not easy to make me cry. And then I was editing and I realized that I said like 5 books made me cry in that same video. So I guess it's not that hard. But I'm anticipating a good cry during this book. Is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I read Circe in this last year, and I thought it was amazing, the retelling of Circe from the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is the retelling, obviously, of Achilles, and I know nothing about Achilles except for that he was killed by an arrow that went through his heel, hence the saying, the Achilles heel. So I am really interested in reading this book. I think it's going to be great. I recently was talking to some of my students and asking them about some book recommendations, and one of the kids brought up The Song of Achilles and said that it was a super amazing read and told me that I have to read it immediately. So because I've heard good things from adults and my friends in the bookish community, and now I'm hearing things from my 8th graders and my 7th graders who have read this, it tells me that this can reach a really wide audience, and I'm really looking forward to figuring out what all the hype is about. Next up, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. As you can see, I started this in 2020, but I wasn't really feeling this. I started this just as I hit a major reading slump in about September, and this was not the book to get me out of a reading slump because it does start very slow, but the vibes were totally there. This is about a girl named Alex Stern who gets accepted into Yale University, but she's not the typical type of student who would go to an Ivy League college. She dropped out of school, she is friends with a bunch of drug addicts, she is not what you'd typically consider a Yale student. But one day in the hospital, she gets approached to join the Yale's freshman class, and she discovers it is because of the secret societies that are within Yale and her belonging to one of them, even though she doesn't exactly know what that belonging might be. So I love dark academia reads. Again, the same as the Poppy War. I love school settings, any sort of school, magical schools, universities, military schools, all of it. I just, it does something for me, man. I think it might be because I am missing my college days and it brings me back. Who knows? But this is a spooky read. It's, from what I've started, it's exactly the kind of vibe that I like. The characters are exactly the type of characters I like to read about, so I'm excited to continue this in 2021. Next, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I haven't read any of V.E. Schwab at this point in time, but it is one of my goals in 2021 where I would like to read more of her books. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is different from anything else that she's written, though. She says that this is the book that she's been wanting to write for the last 10 years. This is about a woman named Addie LaRue who makes a deal with the devil so she can live forever. But the caveat is that nobody will remember her during this time. Until one day, she walks into a bookstore, leaves with the books that she wants without paying because no one would remember her, and somebody runs out to stop her, showing that he did indeed remember who Addie was. That's all I know about this. I don't know what happens from there, but I do know that this is a really lyrical book, which is interesting to me because in the past I've really only read plot-driven books, but I've determined that plot is not the thing that makes me enjoy the book, rather the characters, and I know that the characters in this book are very strong. So I'm excited to give this one a go. Next, we have our only middle grade on this book, which is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. So Nevermore is about a girl who was born on the unluckiest day of the year. So she gets sent away to a place where she has to compete to stay alive, essentially, from what I can tell. And all I keep hearing about Nevermore is that it gives off Goblet of Fire vibes. Just over and over and over is what I keep hearing. And I have been desperately on the search for books that give me the Harry Potter vibes that are written by non-problematic authors, because I want books that give me the same love and joy for reading that I can feel comfortable supporting and that I can really, really pour my whole heart and soul into, like I did when I was younger with Harry Potter. So anyway, Nevermore is, I'm hearing that book. And so I am desperate to give this a read. And of course, I will update you and let you know if it does give off that same magical Harry Potter vibes. Next is the only 2021 release that is on this list, and that is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. I read The Hate U Give a couple of years ago and absolutely loved it, and I'm going to be giving it a reread very soon. This is the prequel to The Hate U Give, which is about Maverick Carter, who is the father in The Hate U Give, as he is 17 years old and he gets a girl pregnant and he's trying to get out of the drug game. I've heard that this is just as powerful as The Hate U Give and just as well written, and I'm very, very excited to find out more about Star's family and about how The Hate U Give came to be, as this does take place about 17 years in the past. Next up, we have The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I don't know a whole lot about this book, if I'm being completely honest. I know it takes place in New York. That's about all I got. I know it's fantasy. That's about all I got. So let's read what it's about, shall we? It says, in Manhattan, a young grad student gets off the train and realizes he doesn't remember who he is, where he's from, or even his own name. But he can sense the beating heart of the city, see its history, and feel its power. And that's all I'm going to read on here because that's all I need to be intrigued. So, and that's all I've read in here before. I still don't know what it's about, but it sounds amazing. And I do know that this is an urban fantasy that is written by a Black author, and that is something I'm trying to get more into, fantasy written by authors of color. Because in the past, I've really only dived into fantasy that is written by white authors. And there's nothing wrong with fantasy that's written by white authors, most times. But I want to get different perspectives in the books that I'm reading instead of just a limited perspective. And I think The City We Became can give me that. And I've heard that it is amazingly written, and I'm very, very excited about it. Next, we have Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I have heard so much about Tiffany D. Jackson in the recent months with her recent release of Grown, but this is probably the book of hers that intrigues me the most. I know that she writes modern mysteries that are really, really hard-hitting and really, really emotional. So as far as I know, this one is about a girl named Monday who one day just doesn't show up to school, and it's about her friend figuring out what happened to her. And I do know that there's a major twist at the end, and I don't know what it's about, but I am here for it. I'm going to be reading this with my detective goggles on, trying to figure out what's happening to Monday, but I'm not very good at guessing plot twists, so I doubt I'll guess it, but I'll try anyway. So anyway, Monday's Not Coming. I'm very excited to give this one a read. Next, we have A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is my beautiful Owl Crate edition with the golden sprayed edges that I love to death. So A Deadly Education is about a magic school where basically you have to succeed or you die. I've heard about some really questionable content in here, and I would like to give it a read for myself to figure out what that's about, because I haven't seen any full context about what it's about. But I do know that I love Naomi Novik's writing. I've read the first book in her Temeraire series before and absolutely loved it, and I love her writing. And as I've said previously in this video, magic schools, or just any sort of school setting, really gets me going. So I think that this one is really going to be a book that I absolutely adore. But I will be going in there with my eyes open for those things that I've heard about. And I really want to keep my mind open to what she was going for and what the consequences of her writing actually are on the real world. So I'm a little skeptical about this after seeing all of those reviews, but I'm still thinking that it's going to be a book that I love. So I hope to get to this really soon. Next, we have Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a historical fiction that is written about World War I and II. I thought it was just one of them, and I couldn't remember which. It's both of them. This is told from the perspective of the goddess Aphrodite as she watches this couple through the world wars and spins her own tale of love and loss throughout their relationship and throughout this huge historical event. I love the idea of that. I have been really big into romance lately and really big into Greek mythology retellings, but I've never seen them combined in a way such as this, in a way that is told from the perspective of somebody that you wouldn't expect. It sort of reminds me a little bit of how The Book Thief was told from the perspective of death, just something that is completely outside of the realm of the story, but gives a new depth to the story. So I think I'm going to love this just as much as I loved The Book Thief, and I'm very, very excited to give this one a go. The next one on here is one of the older books that are on here, and probably one of the most well-known throughout BookTube, and that is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I have never read this series, but I am desperate to get going on it, not necessarily because I'm looking forward to this book, but because I know that some of her later books are really well crafted and really, really amazing, and I want to get the full scope of the world before I dive into those. So my goal for this year is to get started on her Shadowhunters world. So City of Bones is the first book. I've seen the movie. This is about a girl named Clary who can see demons in the real world. And one day she runs into the world of the Shadowhunters, who are the people who hunt demons. So she's discovering who she is, how she got involved in this world, and there's lots of romance and action and fun stuff like that. I know there's a questionable romance in this book, and honestly, it is what it is. I'm going to read this book anyway, and I'm probably going to love this book, even though I definitely won't love the romance like I might have if I had read this when I was 12. Anyway, City of Bones. I'm sure you've all heard of this before. I'm going to read it this year. Next up, we have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. Again, this is my beautiful Owl Crate edition. You can see that it's green on the cover. I'm just going to show you the whole book because it's gorgeous. Look at that there. I love that embossment. And underneath the dust jacket is that scene. Look at that. I love hidden art underneath dust jackets. It's beautiful. I love pretty books. But this is These Violent Delights. This is another historical fantasy book. I know that this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling told in 1920s China. So I'm very, very excited to discover more of Asian culture, which I don't know a whole lot about, and I haven't read a ton of books set in Asia, so I'm excited for that new perspective. And also, this is Chloe Gong's debut novel, and I know that it has been well received by all circles that I have heard from and watched. So I know that I'm going to love this. I just need to give it the time and dive into These Violent Delights. Next up, we have The Black Kids by Christina Hammond Reed. This is a historical fiction, which I know some people find it crazy that you can call this historical fiction because it is set in 1992 in Los Angeles. To me, the 90s, I mean, technically, I didn't live in most of the 90s. I was born in 98. But, like, the early 2000s were just an extension of the 90s, if we're being honest. I grew up, all of those, like, 90s kids only, I grew up with all of that stuff. I grew up having just the one computer and the giant desktop chair and having to play outside all the time and all of that. So, I lived in the 90s, all right? But this book was set before I was born. So in my thought process, 92 is recent historical fiction. So it is historical, it is just very recent. This was set during the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. And this is about a girl who is in high school who was one of the popular kids. She was the top of the social food chain. But then when Rodney King was killed, she became not just one of the kids at school, she became one of the black kids. And this is about her figuring out how her blackness is a part of her identity, and how she feels about all of that. So I'm really excited to give this one a read. I think it will give me a lot of insight into what it's like to be a black student in a mostly white environment. I live in a generally very white state, but the school that I teach at has a really high African American population. So I just think that this book will be really, really good to give me some insight on how it is to grow up being black in a mostly white society. So I'm really excited to give this a read. I think I'll love it, and I think I'll learn something from it. Next, we have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is another debut novel that I am very excited to read. I know it's been well received, and I'm excited to give it a go myself. This is about a boy, Yadriel, who is a brujo, but he was born a girl, and his family is having a really hard time accepting his gender and accepting the fact that he is indeed a brujo instead of a bruja. So in his journey to prove himself worthy to his family of being a brujo, he accidentally summons a ghost of a popular boy from his school who had died, and romance ensues. So I think this is going to be really cool. Again, I think this will give me a cool perspective into Mexican culture and into Latinx culture. My state, as I have said, is a very white state, but we do have, where I live in the state, a high concentration of people of color, of African American students and of Latinx students. So I really am making it a goal for myself to read more books that feature that perspective so I can learn from them. But also, I think that this storyline sounds really good. I am here for the romance, and I've heard that the writing is also amazing. So I'm very much looking forward to reading Cemetery Boys. Okay, we have Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Everyone on BookTube knows this book. Whether they actually have read it or they just have seen it, everybody's at least seen it once because it is mega popular. And what made this book mega popular is the format that it was told in, because it's not written in just prose. It is, in fact, mixed media, as you can see. these are not good example pages. There you go. There's a good example page. So as you go through here, you can see it's told in all different forms of media. So I am very much looking forward to this. I've never read from either of these authors, but I have a feeling I'm really going to love this. I don't know what it's about, honestly. I know that it's science fiction. I know it's young adult. I know it's told in mixed media. Join me in figuring out what this book is. The year is 2575, and two rival mega corporations are at war over a planet that's little more than an ice-covered speck. Now, with enemy fire raining down on them, exes Katie and Ezra, who are barely even talking to each other, are forced to escape on the evacuating fleet. But their problems are just beginning. The fleet's AI has gone crazy. A deadly plague has broken out on one of the ships, and nobody in charge will say what's really going on. As Katie hacks into a tangled web of data to find the truth, it's clear only one person can help her, the ex-boyfriend she swore she'd never speak to again. So this just reeks enemies to lovers from reading that, or actually rather lovers to enemies to lovers, but I'm here for it. This might not be the best thing to read while we are in lockdown for COVID, so maybe I'll wait until things have calmed down a little bit and the vaccine has been distributed before I read something else about a plague breaking out among people, or maybe it'll be therapeutic to read. I don't know, but I am determined I will read this year. This has been sitting on my shelf forever, and I know I'm going to love it, so I just need to give it a shot. 5 more, guys. Number 17. Number 17 is The 5th Season, again by N.K. Jemisin. I only just now realized that I have 2 N.K. Jemisin books on here, but I have heard that she is an incredible author and incredible at creating worlds in her fantasy books. So unlike her last book, The City We Became, which is an urban fantasy, this is a high fantasy about a world where the seasons are becoming deadly. Volcanoes are erupting, snowstorms are happening that are deadly, and I don't know anything else about it. The tagline here is every age must come to an end. I know that this one is very dense, but in a good way, which I'm excited about because that means there's going to be a lot of world building, a lot of character development, and I'm here for it. I just have to keep it in mind and read this when I am feeling like I have the time to really dive deep into a dense book. So maybe you'll see me reading this either over spring break or over the summer when I'm on break from school. But either way, I know this is going to be amazing, and I'm very excited to give this a go. Next, we have Middle Game by Shannon McGuire. This is a book about twins, Roger and Dodger, who are opposites. One of them is very into numbers, and the other one is very into language. They're so good, though, that they actually aren't even human, but they don't quite know it at the beginning of the novel. And that's all I really know about this, but I know that everyone who I've seen has read this has loved it. Oh, that's not true. That's not true. But I know that this is written in a way that I think I'm really going to love it, and this cover just really intrigues me as well. It really gets me, I guess, thinking about what this book could possibly be about. I really don't know much more about this. The last line on this synopsis here says, "Godhood is attainable, pray it isn't attained," which intrigues me like no other. I want to start this book right now. I'm so excited about this book. I need to get going on this. I know I'm gonna love it. Next we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is talked about as a middle grade that's written for adults. So I love middle grade, so that just sounds perfect. It also gives me Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children vibes with the whole synopsis, because The House in the Cerulean Sea is an orphanage, and this is about a guy who works in the department in charge of magical youth who gets called to this house for some unknown reason. I know nothing else about it. I don't want to know anything more about it. I love middle grade. I love Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and this gives me both of those vibes. So I think this is going to be a book that makes, I don't want to say it right now, but I think if I get to this book in 2021, it will make my top 10 of the year, because just everything about it screams things that I enjoy reading. So I'm very excited to get to this. I hope I can get to it really soon. Book number 20 is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. First, can I just say, look at that cover there. I just think it's so gorgeous. This is a Lord of the Flies retelling. I don't actually know if it's supposed to be a Lord of the Flies retelling or if people have just like related it to Lord of the Flies, but this is a book about an island of girls who becomes quarantined because there is a virus going around that basically makes their bodies fall apart. One of the very first pages, I was on a sprint with Christine, and she was reading one of the first pages, and it talked about the skin sloughing off from their bodies. Now, I know this isn't the book for everyone, because I know that some people can get really grossed out by that kind of stuff, but I'm not. I think that kind of stuff is really cool. Actually, I was a pre-med major for 2 years because I find things that have to do with the body to be so fascinating. So I actually think that reading this is going to get my brain going and that I'm really, really going to enjoy it. Even though it feels wrong to enjoy something like that, but I think I'm gonna love it. I think I'm gonna find it to be super interesting. So I guess we'll see. And finally, the 21st book that I am desperate to read in 2021, I will read this year, is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So when I first heard about this, I couldn't give a rat's ass about this book. It did not sound interesting to me in the least. But that's because I was thinking that it was the typical 2000s young adult novel that I've read a million times before, not realizing that A, it's not young adult, and B, this is everything that I love in a sci-fi book. So, this sounds amazing. But Red Rising is about a society where people are categorized based on the color of their blood. I think it's the color of their blood. And so people with red blood are typically the lowest class. They're the slaves. They work in the mines, things like that. Until a guy named Darrow says he will stop at nothing to bring down his enemies. For the first time, red will rise. Hence, Red Rising. Anyway, I have heard that this is amazing. I have heard the character development here is amazing, which, as I've said multiple times, I am here for the characters. The characters are what get me to love a book, and I think that this and these characters are going to really make me think about humanity and morality, and it's set in a sci-fi world, and I'm excited about it. So, those are the 21 books that I will be reading in 2021, hopefully. I do have a TBR game that's going to be coming out, which will definitely make it difficult to have this set TBR for the year, but I'm hopeful that I can do it because I am desperate to get to all of these reads. After talking about those and looking at this stack, I think I'm being a little ambitious, but I've got a whole year. I'm planning to read 100 books this year. I can fit these 21 into that 100 somehow, and I will. Please let me know down below which ones of these you are most excited to read, or if you've read any of them and you love them, because I would love to know. And tell me which ones that I should prioritize first. If you've made it this far, go ahead and leave me a stack of books as the emoji down below, and I will see you guys for the next video. Bye!